everybody, and welcome to the Harry Potter Trading Card Game podcast. My name is Sammy.
I'm Reese.
And I'm Huamin.
And we had a tournament that wrapped up a couple of days ago, and we just want to have this podcast episode talk about that tournament because it's the last tournament before we dive into the next set coming out in a couple of weeks. A lot is probably going to change once that new set comes out. Maybe not a lot's going to change, but we're expecting some new things to potentially come out with a new set. So we just kind of want to go through what this tournament looked like, give our thoughts on it, and have a conversation about it.
I feel like if you say a lot's going to change, then you're extremely optimistic on how much a new set has ever impacted the current meta.
I mean, I think the new sets have enhanced maybe a lot of the meta, but maybe not shifted them in a drastic kind of way. So I guess, I'm not expecting like a drastic change. I guess I'm just kind of expecting some more kind of stapley new pieces added in and maybe some new kind of deck ideas as well.
Well, what can we say from the, before Goblet of Fire set in in this last tournament at least? What were brand new unique decks since Goblet of Fire came out?
Well, from just this last tournament, I think a really popular deck, it was played by two people, was that Love Potion loop deck, of which didn't exist before Goblet of Fire. So I think that is definitely a new thing, and I'm assuming that the people playing it and others are going to try to improve that. So I think that was one of the biggest things that came out of Goblet of Fire.
I would like to have it stated on record that I didn't want to play a Love Potion deck, and then Riz gave me a Love Potion deck, and then I played one.
I think that, and then also I think not necessarily from Goblet of Fire, but I think just in general, a large shift in very control-y type of decks, particularly like a lesson control, into I think more of like a combo-y territory or more of like a mid-range or longer term game plan is more doable for many decks because they're able to keep their stuff. Like those Love Potion decks, I think if Scribble Force and Invisible Ink were still around, that Love Potion deck probably couldn't exist. And I think creatures would also be a little more popular than they are now if those two pieces were still in the game.
I think that creatures were probably in answer to a reaction to like the more lesson control grinding, like get you to not actually play the game type of deck where it felt like, oh, I just need to go faster than them and put more pressure on them. And with those decks out of the game without Scribble Fours and Invisible Ink, then yeah, we do see like those decks that were previously kind of unplayable into those types of decks have started to creep up more, which is why, of course, our top place finisher played probably around 2 lessons in every game.
2 lessons, that's a stretch, I think. Yeah, there's a lot of the combo-y finishers now, like how many decks were running the VTJ at least as just a staple with potions running around?
So that's actually something I want to talk about. There was a conversation in Discord at some point, and somebody said if you're running potions, you should just automatically run one of those cards. And I want to get your guys' opinion on that because 3 of the decks ran it. And I'm curious what you guys think.
That was me that wrote that statement.
Oh, it was you. I thought you responded to that statement.
No, I was the one that said if you're in potions and you're hitting 9 power, you should just put VTJ in your deck.
I agree, yeah. I was running potions, not getting up to 9 power, so I wasn't running it. But yeah, definitely agree. If you're up at that territory, even if your mainstay is some items deck that's only looking at 7 or 8 power for brass scales and whatnot, if you're a potions Arthur deck, I definitely think running BTJ, even in that scenario, is definitely a must.
It just wins you games that you shouldn't win.
I don't know if I'd phrase it exactly the same as that. I think it wins you games that maybe
you otherwise normally wouldn't have won.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, that's the same. It's the same thing.
I think it's more putting an emphasis on it sounding like it's an unfair card in the way it is. I think it definitely used to be unfair with popping 2 out in a go and you suddenly doing 40 damage to a player. But now I think it's 1 at a time is probably a bit fairer.
Yeah, it's definitely fairer. And if your game plan isn't trying to play 2 VTJs, like normally you're not going to play 2 VTJs on someone. It's very hard to set up in a deck that is not meant to set it up. Surprise, surprise. But even like in a normal game, your opponent might get like 7, 8 cards in their hand, and then you hit them for like 14 to 16 card draw, and you just win the game because they're not like expecting it.
Yeah, I think there's partly that unexpectedness to it as well. Whereas if you're
Yeah.
not really playing around it, but I think moving forward, people will be a lot more aware of it just because the conversations you even had, and your
Yeah.
hand count is very important with that sort of thing. But I think when you look at it, when it's not part of a standalone combo, it is just a very efficient burn spell, right? And if it
Yeah.
doesn't kill your opponent that turn, you've just given them a lot of options to get out of the situation.
Like in my match against Drew, which was the great match in which we just cycled love potions all day, he got up to 11 cards because he popped Quirrell, and I was like, okay, draw 22 cards, and then the game was over because we were looping love potion and no one could deal damage.
Oh, thank
And
God it exists then, right? That game we never
yeah,
would have ended. You'd still be going.
we would still be going. That is very true. But it's one of the most efficient reach cards in the game, and efficient reach is good. Who would have
Definitely.
known?
I think the main takeaway for me was though there's a difference between being unfair and winning games you shouldn't win versus giving your deck a different angle of attack to
Yeah, yeah,
deal
yeah.
with ending the
Sure.
game.
Your phrasing may be more politically correct,
Yep.
but we all know what the real sentiment is out there.
Other than VTJ, there wasn't really any particular card that I saw that was, I guess, a surprise to me or that had that kind of comment after the tournament. The rest of the stuff, quite honestly, was kind of standard for a lot of stuff. I think the Love Potion deck and the Marcus Flint deck that we'll talk about are kind of newer, but they were using a lot of old tech just in a bit of a different way, which was interesting. So real quick, we want to run down the starters that were used. So there was one each of Professor Hagrid, Sybil, Professor Snape, and Marcus Flint. And then there were four Draco Malfoy. None of them placed in the top. Three of them were the bottom three decks, and then one placed in third. So it was a very interesting mix. And all the decks were quite different for the most part, except for the two Love Potion decks. So there were two Love Potions, a bumping deck, and then a broken item deck. And they just did not place well.
When we're such low numbers and in a smaller community, the actual placements is going to be widely varied. I mean, I think you couldn't necessarily, and please, Sammy, I mean no harm by saying this. I don't think you could blame Draco for bumping not doing particularly well. I think maybe bumping itself is the problem there because it's maybe too hard to execute or too high costed for what it's doing.
Well, I know in one of my games I drew no Quidditch lessons, so I just had charms out and I couldn't play any Quidditch cards at all, and that was an issue. And then in the second game in that particular round, I drew only lessons and I spent 4 or 5 turns in a row just drawing lessons. And then there was a Love Potion deck I played, and I had a couple of ways to remove items, and they were just damaged out and I just couldn't access them. And so I just kind of I just had awful draws. So yeah, I agree with you that there needs to be multiple plays of that deck to see what would actually happen because 2 or 3 tournaments ago, it did come in fourth. So it did very well in that larger tournament.
Yeah, I think if you played quite a few tournaments, say maybe 100 games, right, you'd see where it generally would come out at. And I don't think Draco is the power level where he himself is behind. I think it's maybe just with the low numbers variation that you got the bottom three decks being Draco.
Yeah, but interestingly, and Homan, I want to hear about the Love Potion deck because I don't think that deck would work without Draco. And I'm curious just your thoughts behind how well it worked or if you thought it wasn't really working in certain situations. And just explain what the deck does too, because it is a new deck.
Yeah, I guess briefly on the kind of shell for the Love Potion that I was running, which was a little bit more different than the Love Potion deck that Drew was running. I think Drew was running a little bit more like ramp, and like he was running Witch Sharpening for ramp, which was a very interesting idea to me. And he was also running charms. Mine was mono potions. I guess what the deck wants to do is just play Arthur, play Brass Scales, play Love Potion, and then every turn it's play Love Potion from your discard pile, hit them for 12 with Arthur Weasley, and then play Invisibility Potion so that they cannot choose any of your cards so that your board is protected. If they can't get rid of your Love Potion, because of Invisibility Potion, they can't deal any damage to you, so you just win by putting them into a situation where they can't do anything to you. I think that the deck does well against other slower decks that can't actually interact with you once you get your combo pieces down. So you're pretty free to just set up, get everything down, and then win the game. The deck doesn't do well into things that have table trouble, especially multiple table troubles. Sometimes you can survive one table trouble. If your board gets wiped twice or three times, it's probably game over because you're just set so far back, and it doesn't do well against decks that can put enough pressure on you that you can't set up Love Potion into Invisibility Potion, or they don't care about Invisibility Potion to still deal damage to you.
So, Riss, you had the deck that came out on top, which was a character build. Do you want to talk about how this character build was different than your last one and what you kind of noticed, learned about the characters?
Yeah, okay. So my list transformed from fourth place to first place. That's the first major difference. No, the major thing was actually going from Transfiguration to Charms, which I suppose sounds very the opposite of what people expect when you're saying you want to be more controlling. But this came through because last time I was running Transfiguration for table troubles is the big thing in the sideboard, and then Astronomy Homework as like a low to the ground interaction piece that I could just discard with Seamus as well. The difference in this one was the interaction pieces from Charms with Missing Parchment, which is essentially like a spell version of Draco Malfoy. Look at your opponent's hand and take a spell from it and discard that. But the controlling part of that is mainly it's a 2-cost spell, so I can get it out very early and get the information from my opponent's hand, what they're doing, what I need to do in response very, very early. And obviously spells is pretty prominent card type, so I went with that one. Probably came from the first tournament, noticing that my Transfiguration was a little bit overcosted for where the characters wanted to sit. I think I had a game last tournament where I played 3 table troubles in a single game and still lost it because I just wasn't doing my own plan enough. So yeah, this tournament had a bit of a switch up with the character count. Obviously increased the Draco Malfoys from just 2 to 4, get a full suite of them, which obviously the 4 decks or half the field running Draco Malfoy as a starter was a big hindrance. But I came across that problem in the last tournament as well. So that's why the Missing Parchment was chucked in. But it also comes along with another benefit of Entrancing Enchantments, which is a 2-mana charm spell again, but it's search your deck for any of your characters that you need. So a good way to keep the deck nice and flexible.
I want to first point out that there was a lack of typical creature decks that you would normally see in a tournament where like you're just playing a bunch of small creatures and then hoping that they carry you to the finish line faster than your opponent can do anything, because low to the ground creatures are usually extremely efficient in terms of action investment, especially when they're played early. Did you do any testing previous to like this tournament into creature decks? Because I do see that your deck list doesn't have too much like interaction into creatures. What, like the 2 Quirrells, the 1 McNair in the sideboard, and then you have a little bit of healing with like 2 Pomfreys and 4 Kitchen House Elves.
I think the Kitchen House Elves is the big one there. So I think if I was playing against a creature deck, would hard pivot into getting Kitchen House Elves out early. Like 2 of them would probably be enough, and then I'd be looking to set up Quirrell. I haven't tested it, no, but coming away from this tournament, there's already a lot of changes I'm looking to make to try and put more interaction in efficient ways. So I noticed that I had a lot of trouble with dealing with characters and events because I have absolutely no interaction for them. So I'm already looking to move into ways to dealing with that sort of stuff, because with the character deck, a lot of it is timing based. So you just need to be able to interact for a turn. Like they might have creatures out and be doing some damage, but you can handle it pretty well for like 3 or 4 turns. You don't really care. You'd rather spend the time just setting up, even if they hit your healing cards. You have Snape as a little bit to get back what you need when you need it into the deck and stuff like that. I think you just definitely much rather set up your board and then you can come back and deal with the creatures later. So definitely looking at adding a few more interactive pieces for permanence, I think.
I think one really interesting thing that you're talking about with your deck is this is now the second or third tournament in a row where you've played more or less the same deck. And each tournament, you're kind of building on it and improving it. And one thing that we've talked about in the past on this podcast is hoping that people will start playing some more decks consistently to keep improving them, to really fine tune them, as opposed to kind of jumping around as much. And we love when people jump around. We love when people just kind of build consistently and just keep improving. And I think with your deck, because you know, won first place in this one and probably the makeup of the tournament, that improvement is definitely a visible thing with your deck. And I just hope more people kind of keep building on these decks and improving them.
That's an
Yeah, for
awful, awful take right there. I, for one, will never play the same deck in a tournament multiple times.
I'm
I
not
think
saying the same deck. It can do like slightly different things.
Oh, yeah, I mean like similar archetypes. I don't do that.
I will be playing this deck until it gets bad. I
That's not happening.
I absolutely love the play style of the deck, and you get to play with all the characters. Like, I mean, that's the main part of Harry Potter, right? You get to see all the friendly faces that you read about when you were a kid.
The main part of Harry Potter wasn't when like Harry accidentally drank venomous tentacular juice 5 times and then died.
I don't remember that happening, but I'm sure if we go back to the books,
Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, page 521, of course.
yeah. Oh no! Oh God, Sorcerer's Stone. Oh, that's right. You guys are Americans.
Yes,
Yeah.
we sure are Americans. Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think obviously I came first, and it was the deck that I chose to play. But I do think characters are in a very very strong spot, and I would
Yep.
say probably a tier or at least a half tier above anything else that can come near it.
Don't know about that, but characters are good. I think that characters as a deck, I'm not sure if it, in like a wider metagame format, if it can survive being like the number one deck. Because it's like a deck that you have to make a lot of certain tech choices to in order to combat other decks. Like you want to decide, oh, how good do I want my matchup into creatures to be? Let me
Mm.
add some more like squirrels into the main board. Let me add some more Walden McNairs into the sideboard or something, right? Or like, am I scared more of combo? Time to add more Draco Malfoys or missing parchments or through the arches. There's a lot of like tech choices that you make when you make characters. And characters themselves also have like a lot of cards that are very good into them, specifically looking at potions with Potions Project and Misbrewed Polyjuice. These are cards that deal a lot of damage to characters. Oftentimes character decks, your deck was running like 14 lessons, I want to say. Oh no, 12 lessons.
12, yeah.
You had 5 in the sideboard. Really sick choice, by the way.
Yeah,
I
thank
love
you. That will not be
uh,
happening again.
yeah, Table Trouble and 5 transfig lessons in the sideboard is a little
Yeah, didn't
ambitious.
happen. Didn't work.
Yeah,
That's going
I'm
to be
pretty
different
sure you
cards
put
next
them
turn.
in. Yeah, you put them in against me, right? And then
I
you're
did,
like,
and then I didn't play
got to
more than
2
two
power.
lessons. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's hilarious.
so yeah, they came straight out. But yeah, look, I think the way the character deck will, I think will work for me at least moving forward would definitely be focusing on a tug of war and combating the hand because I think getting to these hand attacking cards like Draco or Missing Parchment. And there's a suite of them in Charms to look at. They can come out much earlier than your opponent plays the cards that you'd be taking away from them.
Yep.
And taking away the correct card at the correct time, I think buys you a lot more actions and a lot more turns than
Yeah.
it takes to play them out. So I think the focus will, I think, pull even more towards that direction as I
Mhm.
move forward with it because that was what was winning me games. Just like taking the VTJ out of your opponent's hand or taking a character like Arthur or something like that could just make your opponent take too much time trying to recover. Even if they can heal it back or recover it with some recursion piece,
Mhm.
it's a matter of finding either the replacement or the recursion and then playing them and then getting around to it. I think it's a
Yeah.
lot easier to just get early in and strip your opponent's hand of the important bits.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to destroy than create.
Yeah.
That's
I
just
think
how it is.
another thing to mention with the potion suite you were talking about, I lost a game too that misbrewed Polyjuice because I was not expecting it to come out, and they sort of used inheriting the map to find it and then play it immediately the same turn out of the sideboard. So I wasn't ready for that. I was ready for game two, made sure I wasn't susceptible to it. But Protion's Project, I played against last tournament and had multiple copies played against me, had no problem. Impersonating Goyle is another one, had that played against me in both the last two tournaments and was also not problematic. Them discarding, was it Reader even? Or
It doesn't.
Colin, I think, Colin, and then searching out Pomfrey and playing the Pomfrey so I can't play my own. It didn't even matter. Yeah,
It's
so
not
like
great against you. Impersonating Goyle, like just sniping characters one for one is like kind of a losing proposition when your opponent's deck is like 50% characters and they play them for one action.
and then I have bills and entrancing enchantments and Hannah's to get them all back, healing, draw
Yeah,
with
I
Cedric
don't-
and Colin. It's just
I'm not too high on actually like trying to attack characters by killing their characters in play. It's okay sometimes, but
yeah.
it's not an amazing like route to take.
Yeah, I think the point you'd be making with that is it's not the game plan. You just
Yeah.
be very selective about which characters. Like you hit the Pomfrey or something like that. They can't
Yeah.
get it back. They can't heal it and have that recovery that they might need.
It's a very strange matchup if you're developing Pomfrey and not using Pomfrey, though.
Well, I mean, you play it just to play it so that your opponent can't sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. And then the downside, of course, is if it just gets removed before you activate it, it's pretty bad for you.
Another thing I'd probably talk about is I'm running Snape as the starter, and that is because as the character deck, I want immediate access to Lockhart's Hair Care Potion or the Leaky Cauldron, and I will mulligan my hand if I don't have those cards in it, just automatically. It doesn't really matter what the rest of the cards are. I think the thing to note here is I'm not running Ron though, because these efficiency spells, sort of like the enhancers or the enablers of the deck, tend to be the target of my opponent's removal. And if you remove Ron, getting another one back and then playing him is very action intensive. Once you've set up the first Hair Care or the Leaky Cauldron, even having to play a lesson first, if they get removed, they're just a single action to get back, and you can get back into playing your characters on the same turn. So no Ron at all at the moment. And I think I'll probably keep it that way for the time being.
I think my character deck ran 4 Ron, 3 Lockhart's Hair Care. I agree that like when Ron dies, it's really bad, but also after you develop Ron, you should probably either have a Hair Care in your hand or and try to find one and keep one, or just like play one out. I found that Ron is nice in that oftentimes I was having to pop Quirrell in my matchups, and Quirrell bouncing the Hair Care Potion is really annoying. I'm not very high on Leaky Cauldron, but you're running 4, so that's probably different, just like a different taste thing. I understand like location removal is really good, especially since Benjamin, keeps playing, what is it called? Forbidden Corridor. So yeah,
Probably
it's like a meta call, I think.
Yeah, probably some more experience around that after having played it a couple tournaments now. Is the Leaky Cauldron's also really good. I think it's cheap enough that it's only like a lesson and play it, so it's not overtaxing. It's not like it's 4 or 5 cost. But the experience with it versus a Hair Care, right? It's not bounced by Quirrell, so Quirrell's free there.
Yep.
This tournament, I only played Hair Care Potion in 2 games. I think the rest were Leaky Cauldron.
At some point, it's just like, which one did you draw first? And you just develop that.
Yeah, so that's the point. Yeah, there you go. Run the full 4. Yeah, no, you have to run 8 of it because like you're hard mulliganing for either of them. So, but yeah, it's just natural variance. Playing, obviously, yeah, Quirrell can be quite a center point. There's a lot of item decks when there's not creatures around as well. So the bounce there's not horrible or anything. You do have to replay it out and just takes some action. But a lot of the time you're playing it towards the end of the game when you don't care too much and you're kind of already set up. The other thing with the Leaky Cauldron was it did eat a Forbidden Corridor and it also ate an Azkaban at some point. So I did have to like play out again around them, but again, it wasn't overly taxing. It didn't really present a problem during those 2 games where I had to go around it.
Like I said, medical.
Yeah, we'll see if it gets any worse or anything.
Because the power of Leaky Cauldron definitely depends on what locations are in the meta and what are you killing with Leaky Cauldron.
Yeah, I think the important thing with Leaky Cauldron and the rest of the meta as well is Azkaban, Forbidden Corridor don't cost 2. So by the time I've played this and then I get to play out a couple characters, if they're playing the location on top of that 2, 3 turns later, even, it's sort of at the point where I'm not caring as much.
Yeah, so that
Going
was a lot
It was,
about
but it brought up a really good point that I think Riss had said at the beginning of all of that about hand control and using lost parchment or whatever the spell
Missing
was.
parchment, yeah.
Yes.
Who
To
plays
look
this
at
card?
It's
Riss plays
good.
it.
It was good.
Well, remember that Riss is also the person that played Madame Maxime. And so he's used to playing like these cards that do no damage, but like do something, and then Maxime does the rest. But this whole idea of the game is more than just doing damage and like playing your own cards. The game is also what information can I garner about my opponent's hand is really, really powerful. And I think that showed in your deck, obviously, and in your games because you did win. But that kind of pivots really well into the second place deck, which the entire point of the second place deck was to disrupt your opponent's hand and kind of get rid of that knowledge that they have, if you want to call it that. I don't think that they were necessarily looking at the opponent's hand in the same way that you were, but they were destroying their opponent's hand. So it started Marcus Flint, and the point of the deck was to play Marcus Flint and then, or to have it in play, and then to play a locked in or some other adventure that restricted action use. And then the solve clause was to have your opponent discard 4 or 5 cards from their hand. So you'd use Marcus turn 1 or 2, get rid of 3 of their cards, and then use the adventure to get rid of even more. So they really don't have a hand, and then they have to spend a lot of actions to rebuild. Deck came in second place overall, which was quite impressive, and it was also a mono charms build. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts after hearing that whole conversation about characters, this idea of hand control being so powerful and mono charms hand control being so powerful.
That is a big one to talk about because I think, in my opinion, there's very, very different approaches to how they're executing the so-called hand control. Like mine is very much about choosing a particular card that I think is problematic at the time. And with a cost, this one is definitely not about caring about what's in your opponent's hand, just taking away your opponent's ability to play the game by limiting or continuously limiting their hand size. So I think definitely a very different angle of attack.
Yeah, you're like a precision sniper. They're like a carpet bomber.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and I mean they're both effective in their own way. This one's definitely a lot less fun.
Yeah, that I would agree
It's
with that.
it's something. Like I feel like once you set up like if you have your locked in or 5 points from Gryffindor, you got your Hogwarts of History out, and then you're just playing for purple firecrackers every turn, and they're like, oh, I have one action, I draw a card, and then I draw a card for my action, and then I just lose everything to purple firecrackers the next turn.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
it's something.
something I'd talk about with this one is because I had the game plan executed against me in the final round, obviously, and I think I tried to keep cool about it, and I did not surrender. Which one is it? It's I don't think it was 5 points from Gryffindor. It was one of the other ones.
He's running 5 points and locked in as his and
It
for
might.
private drive, but I don't think for private drive does anything to you.
No, I think it was locked in. I think I
Yeah.
didn't solve locked in immediately, and that was the important part because they
Yeah.
played it their first turn, even I think, and it put me down in action. But I definitely had to think about that one and go, no, it's more important that I get the cards I'm going to need in order to respond, set up myself first, even if I'm taking that hit because it's a lock deck, right? As soon as I open the door for it, it'll probably just run away with the game. So I had to wait, search for my Cedric and go, yep, I'm going to have a turn with Cedric to refill my hand and not be vulnerable to this anymore. So
Yeah, I do think that the deck is also uniquely not great into characters because characters has too many ways to refill their hand. They have Colin, one of the most efficient card draw cards in the game. They have, as you said, Cedric, refills your hand from absolutely nothing. And they also have a large number of ways to get actions. Your deck runs Seamus and Godric Gryffindor. So sitting on 1 action turns is actually not that bad when your 1 action turns become 3 action turns.
So I actually like the Marcus deck mainly because I just enjoyed seeing a really unexpected starter be the starter. And I think that's always just a really interesting thing for a deck when I'm like, oh, that's somebody that I've never seen as a starter, and that's really, really cool. So it was really fun just for that reason. But this tournament was also really interesting because the lesson type breakdown, I think, except for Quidditch, RIP, shifted a lot from what we have typically seen. So 6 decks were playing charms, 5 were playing potions, 3 were playing transfig, 2 were playing creatures, and I was the only person playing Quidditch.
How does it
And
feel
it,
to
I
be the
mean, you
only
know
Quidditch
what?
player?
I will wave that flag until the day I die, and Quidditch will be bad on the day I die, and that's fine. But with most tournaments, we've seen creatures have a bit more of a showing. And honestly, the creature decks that did that were in this tournament, they were kind of like adjacently creature decks. That wasn't really kind of the point of them. So that
Mm.
it's still odd. But yeah, so charms and potions have kind of taken over like the top spot in this past tournament from to be the most used lesson type, which is interesting. So what do you guys think about kind of this general shift? I will say real quick that potions was also the top played color in the last tournament as well, and creatures was also at the bottom with Quidditch as well.
I think it's a probably a result of the bannings that have happened, and the same thing we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. It's been a shift of a board control state with scribble fours and invisible ink and stuff, where you could have a creature out and then dedicate the rest of your game to denying your opponent lessons and the ability to play back while your creature slowly wins. That was the big advantage of them, and I don't think we have that sort of ability anymore. It's all moved to the charms potions where all the combo stuff sort of lies, which is, I think is a result of that. So it definitely feels like maybe we need to bring some more balance in with aggro decks being able to compete with things that just stop your opponent from playing the game, like the corridor deck and the love potions decks and stuff like that. Maybe
Yeah.
the survivability is a bit too much for them now.
I think it's very hard to say like where an aggro deck would have placed in this tournament, just simply because there were no aggro decks, and that's kind of weird. But I also think that there might have been a shift away from aggro decks because like the traditional creature deck isn't actually all that interesting to play. Unfortunately, it's like I play lesson, I play creature. I play lesson, I play creature. I play lesson, I play creature. I play creature, I play
Yep.
creature.
Yeah,
And
it's
then you're
very
done.
boring.
And it's
But
like
going to like what Magic does for aggro, I think that's really boring too. It's I'm just gonna play all these really cheap spells as quick as I can and just win. And like, sure, there's strategy in it, and you have to like sequence stuff right. But similar to the aggro deck in this game, I think it's very boring.
well, obviously you've never hit someone for 10 poison counters with a listener elf on like turn two.
Because I'm not a
So
jerk who would do that to somebody. That's why I've never
Well,
done
so
it.
that's not an aggro deck, that's a combo deck.
what? Infect is totally an aggro deck.
No,
Or
it's
it used
combo.
to.
Yeah, I very much understand they're boring, but I think most people understand the need for aggro decks to exist. They keep
Yeah.
these greedy decks in check by
Yeah,
saying
yeah, yeah.
stop being so greedy.
Exactly.
So they're like an essential part of the ecosystem to keep the format healthy.
I definitely agree with that, but also
They're boring.
yeah, and I don't know if we have like the player base to support every single pillar of a normal card game format, which has pros and cons, I guess. It is what it is.
Well, one
Um,
one thing that we talked about offline before we got onto this was that as designers, part of our job is to design stuff that is more interesting and is just kind of providing new avenues for things or helping to supplement things or whatever. So, do we need to shift our focus back onto creatures? Because we've been very aware of kind of toning down creatures a little bit. So, do we need to kind of shift that mindset?
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of feel probably we do. Like I think aggro needs a place, and yeah, I think from this conversation we need to make it interesting. Maybe you have decks that require interaction to make the aggro in the same way a Delver deck does in Magic, or even like similar idea with the gargoyles that exist here. Like maybe we just need to make the support around them, not even necessarily the creatures, or maybe the creatures need to have on play effects that make them interesting, that give the player some selection or something. Yeah.
Or have other abilities that are not just when you play Black Bat, deal 2 damage. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Well, and most creatures too, and like why Black Bat and Welsh Green I think rose to the top was because when you play them, they did something, kind of what you guys were just talking about. Whereas like when you play other creatures, they just sit there for a turn and there's no immediate impact. Whereas like a spell, immediate impact. items immediate. Events can be here or there, and adventures, characters, whatever. But yeah, so maybe we need to shift this. I don't know if Quidditch World Final is going to necessarily provide a lot of stuff with that. I think it'll provide some, but I don't think it's going to be enough to like drastically shift the creature deck.
It's also very awkward because like limited as a format
Yeah.
or limited in this game, if you make the creatures a little too efficient, they just steamroller everything. Unfortunately, like
Yeah, it's going to be balance based for that.
Yeah.
definitely the easiest archetype to just like accidentally overtune because if you print like very constructed level things, other limited archetypes just die, unfortunately, because you just cannot be as efficient as like just a one card, like I'm going to deal 3 damage to you every turn with a limited card pool. If you're trying to do something like combo or like even just like spells, like spell damage, is hard to compete with that.
I mean, I'm hoping in the future, maybe with the next set, maybe not, because there are 10-ish more Quidditch cards than the other colors in the next set. I am really hoping that Quidditch gets some kind of boost, but I don't think it's going to become anything more than what it is, and I'll just be the only person still, which is fine.
I don't think that Quidditch is in like necessarily a bad spot right now. Like, it's hard to tell as well, like with such a small sample size. Like, if we're
Yeah.
looking at just one tournament, decks can spike. People can play badly. People can draw badly. People can play super well. People can
Yeah.
draw super well. Like, there's just variance in TCGs, and that's okay.
Let's move to kind of like a last topic for this episode. And as I kind of open this episode, I guess this is a really great wrap up. So the most popular GOF cards, now that we've had 4 tournaments playing with just that set and nothing new coming out, we're able to see what were the most used cards, what colors were the most used, that kind of thing. And so just kind of giving like a brief rundown really quick. We had Enchanted Tables and Disciplinary Transfig. Both had 6 decks in tournaments play them. Rita, House Elves, Bill, and Electric Fireplace all had 5. And then an advanced guide to Transfiguration, or a guide to advanced Transfig, was had 4 decks playing it, and everything else kind of fell somewhere in there. And so when I look at these top played cards from Goblet of Fire over the past year, many of them have some kind of colorless component to them, or are some type of control-y situation, or work really well in a control-y deck. Kind of the exceptions being Enchanted Tables, which really helps items, which items are very popular as well. So what are your guys' thoughts on this group of Goblet of Fire cards being the most played, thinking about designing in the future as well?
Why is Enchanted Tables at 6? What in the world?
Well, it's like a worse Wadawasi, I guess, but it doesn't get rid of
No,
your item. So
it's a better
is it
Wadawasi.
better? Yeah,
Yeah.
right? Right?
It's more efficient card wise. Like Wadawasi is usually 2 actions for like 10-ish, 12-ish damage. Enchanted Tables is what, 1 action for like 9.
Well,
So
and I think Tables is more of just a direct like do damage, whereas
yeah,
Wadawasi right now is going into this combo area with the potions Goblet of Fire book. I can't think of what it's called right now, but it's going more
uh,
into like that direction.
yeah, and that's like it's okay. That's all I'll say. It's okay.
I think maybe to your point, in the previous conversation, Humin, is that maybe they're just fun. Like,
Sure.
people are picking them up because they're fun cards to play. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what's not fun about like building a centric theme and then having this payoff be that much more powerful because the setup paid off and was executed, right? So I can definitely say that about Rita, House Elves as well, as sort of like they're fun cards to play. Rita is great in the character deck, obviously, as she's just like a consistent way that you still have to interact and choose when you're using her to get the damage through. The House Elves, it was like every turn choosing what you're healing. It's a lot of fun going, okay, I need this card in my graveyard in case I draw a Hannah or get some other recursion piece, but I want to put these lessons back because of Potions Project. I'm going to have to try and reduce the likelihood of dying to that, or all these sorts of things.
I'm pretty sure Rita, House Elves, and Bill are up there solely because of you, Riss. Good job.
I,
Probably.
I can only max be 2 of those.
Yeah, and then there was that who was playing the Oliver Captain Oliver deck
Oh yeah.
2 tournaments ago.
Drew or Ben, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that was another set of Rita, House Elves, and Bill, I'm assuming.
I'm actually
But
surprised not to see more of the two power or the two power providing books from Goblet of Fire, because when I play like casually with people, those 5 cost books are played in so many decks. But then in the tournaments, they seem not to be played as much, which just surprised me. And in all of the tournaments over the past year, nobody played the creature 5 cost book.
Mediterranean, what is it called? A Guide to Plants of the Mediterranean? Something.
Yeah.
Something. Mediterranean Plants and Guide are in the name. But
You guys made it.
yeah, it's something.
Yep.
It's like the auxiliary benefit of that is not great, I'll say.
Agreed. Yeah.
So, like, it heals things, right? And
I think it also
normally,
is in Kara magical creatures, so it's probably a function of the color as well. I mean,
yeah, like,
because it's brown, it's not being played in any deck because there are no creature decks.
well, even in like creature decks that would play the book, there are very few mono creature decks. So if you have to put in a book, why would you put in the F book instead of the other color, which has an auxiliary benefit that is probably going to be relevant?
Well,
Yeah,
and I remember designing that. I think it changed later because originally it was going to help just plants, and then we
Yeah.
kind of expanded it. And I think both of those, just as you're saying, are not good in generic creature stuff.
Yeah, you have to be playing something like Pumpkin Patch and Fluffy or something to actually want to remove damage from your creatures, which, by the way, is a cool deck. Maybe not tournament worthy, but maybe I'll run it in a tournament because I just play random stuff in tournaments and I haven't played this yet. So I think coming out of this, like, these are probably not like the cards that I would have expected GOF cards to be played. Like, I definitely would have expected the GOF books to be at the top, but also, I guess maybe if you add them all together, then they're at the top. And I think it speaks to like what are we designing and like how maybe we're a little too
conservative.
conservative, yeah, about like how strong the top end of things can be. Because especially what we're looking at right now is that we're seeing a lot of decks move into like a sort of lock type playstyle where taking over from like the lesson destruction of old, we're seeing like these combo lock pieces that also aren't letting decks get up to like 10 or 12. So some of those cards that are up there, like Madness of Mr. Crouch or like Seeing the Unseen, are just not really being played because it's hard to actually hit the power to consistently play these things. Though shout outs to the Marcus deck was running Madness of Mr. Crouch, but I'm very interested in how many times he was actually able to play it.
He played it against me, and it was
Yeah, it's not very good against a deck that doesn't have cards that have blessing
power.
costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like when I was analyzing his deck, I was like, yeah, this is not very good into characters. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that just don't work or work very badly. Which maybe is like that's a reason to go into the strongest color in the game, potions these days, for like Mr. Polyjuice or something, or I don't know, some other character answer. Or
Potentially.
maybe let's like maybe we should be thinking about like what is a character answer that we should be printing soon, or like cards that do things that characters do so that characters aren't played as much. I don't know. Something to think about.
I
Yeah.
think with respect to the books as well, like they definitely feel like a card because there's a cycle of them that would be played a bit more. But it was the first sort of real adventure or movement into too powerful one card after the banning of One Shop, which is what we're sort of looking at. So next
Mhm.
set, there's going to be more of it, more ramp, more power for a single card. I think maybe decks can start looking at the higher end again and not just in a lock position like the love potion sort of loop or something like that. So maybe they'll see play. Maybe they will.
So now we're going to get to the part of the podcast when we spoil a card from an upcoming set, or at least parts of a card from an upcoming set. And so we have, I'm going to give you guys parts of it and not the entire thing, but we essentially have a Charms card that lets you reveal the top 5 cards of your deck and then put all the lessons into play and the rest on the bottom. And then you get to draw some cards as well. So this card is going to give you hopefully some ramp as kind of part of the idea of it, as well as a bit of draw. So it's going to do a bit of a lot of different little things. We're super excited about it, mainly because, at least I am, mainly because of the ramp part of it and ramp in terms of lessons, not just power, which I always think is a cool thing to do. So that is the card that we're going to spoil on this episode, and you guys will probably see in like 3 or 4 weeks.
Exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to playing this card, revealing 0 lessons, and then crying.
Yep.
I mean, that's the risk versus reward part of it, right? I think though, in general, you'd think you'd probably hit 2 lessons on
Yeah.
average, somewhere around there.
You would
Hopefully.
hope, but considering in Magic, most of the decks I play are reveal the top cards, X number, and then put stuff into play, and I whiff almost every single time. I don't believe that statistics are real anymore because I always just fail.
Statistics aren't real.
They're not. They're
People
not.
give
I'm
you, like-
convinced they are not real because I whiff
Yeah.
every time.
people are talking about like, oh yeah, mulligan chances for like hitting your lessons are real. Don't listen.
And Riss is just like writhing over there because he does stats all the time.
Yeah, he
Oh my
does.
God.
They're
Yeah.
not real. Don't
I would,
listen to them.
yeah, I wouldn't have a job if they weren't real. But yeah, no, look, I think taking away from the whiffability you have, Sammy, this is definitely one of the ones where maybe the deck will start evolving to be the divination style thing where you
Oh,
really get
God.
a payoff for, play, what is it? What's that 1 cost Quidditch spell that's look at the top 6
Oh,
cards of your
I'm out.
deck?
I'm out.
Timeout. There you go. Something like a timeout. Rearrange
Oh.
them. Well, I don't know.
Listen, if
No,
we're
no, no.
talking about a deck comboing with timeout, then we're talking about a very janky build of a deck.
look,
And I'm
we're
here
talking
for
about
it.
hands, but no, the real thing is that this is an answer to when your opponent plays the planetary divination and stacks your entire deck with only lessons on top.
Exactly.
And then you just
right.
like prior incantado, get wrecked. I'm gonna take 5 lessons.
We're gonna have, that one game where people gonna start complaining about the overtunedness of this card from a tournament where it just happens to like reveal 4 or 5 lessons all in one go, and like this card's broken. What the hell are they? No. Seriously though, in respect to this card, I think a great benefit from this one will be, sure, you get multiple lessons, no real different than like Dragonheart Wand, right? Or any of the books we were just talking about. But I think a great difference here is they're coming out as lessons and not just power on a card. So we've talked about already like Quirrell or some of the table troubles that you can come across and this sort of thing. And I think we'll see a few cards from the next set coming out, which will do a bit more of this lesson ramp where you get maybe 2 lessons out or more for just the 1 card and 1 action sort of thing. So a big benefit from this being that the removal against them is either not there or a lot less effective because they're getting multiple cards out for you rather than just a central point that's ramping you.
Definitely stickiness wide boards. These are very excellent things to have into a somewhat more of a control-y meta.
Well, thanks guys for chatting about the most recent tournament. It was a lot of fun. I'm super curious to hear what our conversation is going to be like for the next tournament, because we're going to have 90-ish new cards for that, and it's just going to be maybe a different conversation, hopefully not the exact same. So yeah, that's who knows what's going to happen and how all of you are going to deck build.
Sounds about right. Play more aggro. I know it's boring, but we need some more aggro. Maybe I'll play
Yeah.
aggro. I keep saying maybe I'll play X.
You have a lot of stuff to play.
Yeah, it's life.
Awesome.
I mean, just haven't had like a very generic mechanical creatures like deck for a while. Maybe I just
See
need
how
to
it
play that.
goes. Destroy
Yeah.
the creatures. Destroy the character deck.
There you go.
I don't know. It might be a little favored, but I'm not even sure. It is what it is.
Well, make sure to follow all of our socials linked below. Stay tuned for the next episode of the podcast and join our Discord, Facebook, and everything else because we will be posting a lot of spoilers coming up. And then we will have the full set coming out in June. And we're really excited to share that with you all and play with you all. So until then, we'll see you guys later.
Peace.
Bye.